Reparations have begun here in the U.S., outright and overtly called reparations. Now, many people disagree with the idea, but there's an actual argument about whether or not the United States government should pay reparations to those who are descendants of slaves. It's a real argument. Now, many people have come out against it. Many people have come out for it. And much of the arguments for it are that historical racism and lack of access to resources has resulted in historical poverty. And by providing reparations to the descendants of slaves, namely black families, we can help normalize society and end some of these impoverished areas by giving resources to these families. I actually think there is a decent argument to be made here. The problem is we had a civil rights era. We fought for equality and now need to recognize that there is historical wealth affecting people of all races, and that by providing people of one race with reparations, I don't think will actually solve the problem. We will still have impoverished individuals of particular races, which brings me to the next point. Now, again, I'm actually not opposed to the idea of reparations. I am not. I'm not a big fan of it. I don't completely agree with it. I just think there is a logical argument to be made, and I think it's fair to say maybe it won't work. Personally, the reason why I lean against these ideas is because I think there are poor white people as well. And at this point, we solve the problem of poverty by focusing on class and not race. Now, I recognize that there is historical racism, which is tied to poverty. So it's an interesting argument then, because if the left truly believes that black families and families of color, a variety of marginalized peoples, are disproportionately affected by racism, well, then a class-based solution would disproportionately benefit them. You just wouldn't leave behind any poor people. The problem with this is that we have moved beyond any claim of reparations. We are now entering into just anti-white government payments. Oakland launches guaranteed pay plan for low-income people. What the Associated Press leaves out is that this is for low-income families of color. That's right. This is not reparations. It's a guaranteed income program that just doesn't give white people guaranteed income. It's not reparations, because low-income families of color, I mean, that could be an Asian family, could be a Latino family. I don't think there's a conversation around providing reparations to Latinos. It's about descendants of black families or those, black families, descendants of those who were enslaved. We're seeing the overt reparations happen in Evanston. And I think this segment is important because white Americans, namely suburbanite families, are in for a very rude awakening. Last night on the Timcast IRL podcast, we hosted Jody Shaw. She is a white liberal woman. She was a staffer at Smith College. This is in Northampton, Massachusetts. I believe it's in Northampton. Well, she said that over time, there were these conversations around diversity, inclusivity, and equity. And it felt weird, being criticized or demeaned based on your race when they would say white people are bad and white people have to do these things. But that she thought it was normal. White people aren't supposed to complain about this stuff. But then eventually it got so intense and so bad, she was forced to file a complaint about racial discrimination against her for being white. And there is this default position many white liberals have had for a long time, where they don't feel they have the right to complain about racial discrimination. But this goes back decades. The idea is rooted in a time when white people were the overwhelming majority. Now they're just a strong majority, between 66 and 70%. But there was a time when it was 80 or 90%. And so the idea was they didn't have all that much to complain about for the most part, because why should they care if a small minority of individuals is criticizing them? Things are different today, when in many cities, it's actually not the case that white people make up the majority, at least in some cities. And in several institutions, it doesn't matter what your race is, they will racially discriminate against you. Now, that's a violation of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. But as we start to see things like reparations, there's going to be what the left has been calling for, a white racial awakening. Now, I personally don't think that's a good thing. I think we should all recognize we're humans, we're Americans before anything else, and we live together and we share this beautiful and amazing country with a beautiful and amazing constitution. But something is happening. Jody Shaw's story is effectively what many white nationalists want to happen. Now, again, I'm not imputing the honor of Jody. I think she's rad, and she's a regular liberal individual who just realized that she was being held back through no fault of her own, simply on the basis of race. That cannot be accepted. Now, white nationalists seek to capitalize on this anger and rage to drum up support for their identitarian policies. But I don't care whether you're a white identitarian or an anti-white identitarian. I think identitarianism is wrong. And I think this country, the great American melting pot, brings many different people of cultures and race together. The problem now is when you hear stories about people saying they finally realized that they were being discriminated against, you will have white racial awakening. It's what white supremacists are hoping for, and it's what I've been warning about. You see, reparations for black residents in Evanston, honestly, not a big deal to me. Like I said, I'm not opposed to it for the most part, although I lean against it because I don't think it's actually going to solve a lot of these problems. But localized reparations maybe make sense. Think about it this way. In Evanston, Illinois, you will have like the grandchild of a family that faced racial discrimination, racial covenants, redlining, blockbusting, and things like that. They will provide access to loans or a reasonable way to purchase a home in a better neighborhood to help solve the problem of, the poverty that's created historically from these laws. For those that aren't familiar, Chicago was it's where the phrase redlining comes from. It's where they basically would not sell to black families. I certainly think remnants of blockbusting and redlining have created and contributed to historical racism. However, are we really going to solve that problem these days when it's already illegal to do these things? So ultimately, I say I don't think race-based reparations solves that problem, but here's what's happening in Evanston, Illinois. NPR reports the city of Evanston will make reparations available to eligible black residents for what it describes as harm caused by discriminatory housing policies and practices and inaction on the city's part. The program is believed to be the first of its kind in the U.S. and is seen by advocates as a potential national model. Evanston City Council voted 8-1 on Monday to approve the local reparations restorative housing program, an official confirmed to NPR over email. It will grant qualifying households up to $25,000 for down payments on or home repairs, according to the city. And is the first initiative of a city reparations fund that was established in 2019. So let's stop. Like I said, I don't think this is the solution, but I will point out some benefits and some positive argument, I suppose. If the city of Evanston, just the city of Evanston, votes to allocate their taxes this way, I don't care what Evanston does. I don't live there. If this is what they think is right, then so be it. And if the resources being provided are focused primarily, they must be used in specific ways, like down payments for houses or repairs, I actually kind of like the idea. You have dilapidated homes. You have dilapidated neighborhoods. If we can repair this, I'm in favor of it. You take a look at New York City, for instance. They have the Upper West Side, extremely wealthy. Well, the way taxes work is that they naturally just pay more in taxes because they have more money. Percentage-wise, it's the same for most people with New York City's income tax. But then they can use these taxes to repair poorer areas that don't have as much, because we as a country, as a community, are only strong as our weakest link. So if the city decides to do it, I'm not necessarily in agreement. Let me slow down and just kind of break this down. The main points I'm trying to get across in this segment. Reparations are not where it ends. As I pointed out from the AP story, it's eventually going to be, we're just going to print money and give it to people who aren't white. And the problem I have is I like the idea of helping the poor. I don't like the idea of having it based on race. I think there are going to be many impoverished people in Evanston who may be white or mixed race families who will not be eligible for this simply because they're the wrong race. And I don't like it. I can understand that they're trying to rectify past racism, but you don't solve the problem of racism with more racism. Of course, if you ask Ibram X. Kendi, who wants everyone to be racist and segregated, then you do. And that seems to be what the left is focusing on, and that's what they will get. They say the program is a step towards revitalizing, preserving, and stabilizing black African American owner-occupied homes in Evanston, increasing home ownership, and building the wealth of black African American residents, building intergenerational equity among black and African American residents, and improving the retention rate of black and African American homeowners in the city of Evanston. In November 2019, the city council established a reparations fund to support initiatives addressing historical wealth and opportunity gaps for black residents, to be funded by the first $10 million in revenue from the city's tax on the sale of recreational marijuana. The housing program is initially budgeted at $400,000. I'm fine with this. Check it out. If you live in Evanston and you have a house, your taxes aren't going to the reparations. Your income tax not going to the reparations. You know what it is? The people who are buying pot. I don't think they care either. So you buy pot, you pay a tax, and that tax goes to reparations. Fine. If you don't want to pay that tax and contribute, don't buy pot. And I kind of feel like a lot of people who don't want to contribute to this probably wouldn't buy pot either. However, I do recognize still the problems of race-based programs, which brings me to where it ultimately ends up. The AP reports, the mayor of Oakland, California, on Tuesday announced a privately funded program that will give low-income families of color $500 per month with no rules on how they can spend it. The program is the latest experiment with a guaranteed income, an idea that giving poor people a set amount of money each month helps ease the stresses of poverty that often lead to poor health while hindering their ability to find full-time work. Sorry, you're wrong, AP. Notice how they keep saying poor people, poor people, poor people. That's the manipulation. That's the lie. They're saying low-income families of color. So not low-income white families. No, you get to suffer based on the color of your skin or your ancestry. Although I suppose most people might figure out they can probably just identify as however they want and then gain access to these programs as well. You see, this is not reparations. This is literally just stripping away the resources from everyone to allocate towards people based on race. This is going to make racism worse. And so I reference the problem here, and I reference the Jody Shaw story to explain the issue of why it's bad that there will be a white racial awakening. Let me tell you what's going to happen. As more and more liberals start to question this, low-income liberals, for instance, who are like, I can't pay my bills and I don't get money because I'm white. That's it. You know, there could be a wealthy, black family that people say deserves reparations. Why should we be focusing on, Will Smith's family or Oprah as oppressed when they're extremely wealthy? So these ideas ultimately go in dangerous directions. Now, mind you, I understand this is for low-income families. But what happens when white individuals have a racial awakening? And that's what they're calling for in Sacramento. Check this out. This is in Sacramento they say Sacramento, California, but it's going to be happening in Oakland. In Sacramento, that's where the schools are doing the affinity groups so that white students can form their own groups and talk about their shared history and their feelings and have a white racial awakening. As I've often pointed out, do you think if you take a large group of white people and then put them in a room and have them talk to each other about their shared history and what they believe, that they will just start hating themselves? Some might, but I don't think so. I think every form of life wants to fight for survival. And so when you look at a story like Jody Shaw's at Smith College, she stood up for herself and said, stop making this about race. I don't feel comfortable. You're making a hostile work environment, criticizing and attacking. Now, Jody is a smart, more liberal-minded individual, waking up to the realities that is the critical race theory and the threats posed by these racist policies. But she's not racist. What happens when you do this and people have an awakening and then realize they are racist? What happens when racists encounter this stuff? You know what they're going to do? Quite simply, they're going to just decide to form a racial identity group based on being white, and they're going to use their collective majoritarian power to vote for things they want. California had a proposition that would have removed the civil rights provision from their constitution. It was defeated, and I'm glad it was. But if it was removed, theoretically then, public institutions in California would have the right to discriminate based on race. And so I asked my progressive friends, do you know what the percentage, the racial demographic breakup in California is? It is mostly white. I think it's like 70% white. So when you look at these smaller cities in, central and northern California where they're mostly white, do you think that they're going to use the newfound powers to discriminate on the basis of race to harm themselves? Why would they do that? I asked my friend, do you think that these conservative areas that are, all white people, do you think they would pass laws and put up signs saying, only white people allowed and stuff like that? The progressives seem to think so. And my progressive friends did. And I said, so why would you advocate for this? They didn't really have a good answer. Now, ultimately, I don't think conservatives would do that because I think these ideas have long since faded. It is actually the left that wants segregation. It is white progressives calling for segregation and calling for the expansion of these policies. Don't take my word for it. Here's a story from CNN. 2 Asian American senators back off threat to oppose Biden nominees after White House agrees to add senior AAPI advisor. CNN reports Senators Tammy Duckworth and Mazie Hirono on Tuesday backed off their threat to vote against any of President Joe Biden's nominees who aren't minorities after going public with their anger that the cabinet lacks Asian Americans. And Duckworth earlier saying she felt insulted by the White House's attempts to brush off her concerns. I get it. People use identity for everything. The alt-right has criticized me heavily, saying that the only reason I don't understand identitarianism is because I don't have a racial identity, being mixed race. Maybe they're right. The only thing I had with my friends growing up was that we were all Americans, and that's why I like America, because I think civil rights won. I think they were right to fight for it, and I'm glad they did. And now we have a great American melting pot, and I think it's been fantastic up until the establishment neo-lib identitarian types and far leftists started coming out, seizing power, and basically tearing the country apart. I don't blame conservatives for the culture war. I, in fact, blame the woke leftists. Now, there are many anti-woke leftists. All right, I don't agree with them on, socialism or whatever, but hey, look, we can argue economic policy all day and night and authoritarianism. But I think we have a serious problem with the country being torn apart by policies like we see from these Democrats. You must have the person must be a minority or else. No, hire the best person. I don't care. And I'm part Asian. I don't care. Just hire the best person. In Oakland, they're going to start giving money, straight cash, which means if the money is printed or granted from the Fed or something like that, it dilutes the buying power of everybody else. More likely, though, it's going to be from taxes, in which case people are going to be paying money, and that money is going to be allocated to other people based on race. How is that going to solve the problem of racism when you create racial animosity between people? It's not going to. I think you got a lot of racists on the West Coast. And I think there are a lot of white supremacists, like real ones, who will use this to gain power. And it'll work for them. It will. You're going to see people finally snapping, saying they're tired of being made fun of. In fact, many of the alt-right over the past several years have stated this publicly. They were tired of being attacked for being white, so they found the only group that made them feel safe and wanted. There's a meme about this, where it's like a white guy minding his own business, and then a diverse group starts screaming at him. He's a white oppressor. He looks to his right, and there's a big group of white people with torches, and they're like, don't worry, you can be one of us where we appreciate you. And so he joins the torch march. That's what a lot of people were feeling. Nobody likes to be attacked based on things they can't change. But I assure you, people will do whatever they can to survive when they feel threatened, same as any other creature on this planet. No, maybe not any other, but most other creatures try to survive. I think the problem is leftist identitarianism, which is in government, which is happening now in front of us, which is allocating tax resources, is going to create a surge in the other direction. And that's literally happened over the past few years. It's going to result in insane policies from Democrats, from governors, and the president. And then you're going to see white people in this country start to ask themselves questions about what the laws should be and what they want. It's almost like the Democrats figured it out. The Democrats, historically the party of Jim Crow, the Klan, slavery, and the South, and the Civil War, have always been in favor of racism. And many people say, yeah, well, the parties switched. They didn't. I don't think they did. I think what actually happened is the Democrats realized the path to victory was subversive, not overt. When they came out and they were racist, they were unpopular because people don't like racism, even conservatives and Republicans. Mind you, the first senators in this country that were black, the first politicians at the federal level, I believe were Republicans. Abraham Lincoln, Republican. Now, Republicans certainly have their share of racists and always have. And there were people who probably would have been a Democrat in the past, people who fly Confederate flags who are Republican now. So there is some blending of the parties over time. But now the Democrats are proposing policies that will ultimately just lead to white people as the majority voting for their own interests. And there you go. What more do you expect will happen? And that's it. The fact that they're straight giving money to low-income families is, I think it's just proof that it's not about reparations. It's literally just about racists trying to segregate. They say the reason white households in Oakland on average make about 3 times as much annually than black households, according to the Oakland Equity Index. It's also a nod to the legacy of the Black Panther Party, the political movement that was founded in Oakland in the 1960s. That's their justification. Pay inequity. We have cultural issues. When I look at movies and they say that they're going to have a black male lead or whatever in this new series, I don't care. Cool. Actually, I kind of like it. I've talked to many friends, many conservatives, and I've said things like, look, the first Marvel movies, you had Iron Man, white dude, you had Captain America, white dude, and Thor, white dude. Do you really think that every single Marvel movie they're going to make is just going to be a white dude? At a certain point, you're going to get a female of color, an Asian lady, a Mexican guy. You're going to have different people headlining as the main heroes in these stories. That's just a natural consequence. So when they come out and they announced, was it Shang-Chi, I think is the new movie, one of the movies they're doing, and it's an Asian superhero lead, I'm like, cool. I think we need it. I think we need representation, and I think we need our movies, our TV shows, our comic books to reflect a diverse America. The problem is the wokeness is they preach, they beat you over the head, and they don't treat these people like regular people. That's not going to work. Here's what we need. You do a movie, Black Panther. I thought Black Panther was actually fantastic, seriously, because you had Wakanda, you had, T'Challa, this leader who was an ethno-nationalist. He was like, our country is only for our people. And it's like, wow. And then you had the bad guy who was basically Wakandan Hitler, who was like, our people are the best. And it was like looking at these two kind of awful ideologies, especially how they had what was their government was based on ritualistic bloodline combat, patriarchal bloodline combat. Seeing that and seeing that nuance and that political debate was fantastic. They even have the line where it's like T'Challa's like, if we open our borders to these other people, they'll bring their problems with them. I'm like, it's a really amazing thing to see that political discourse happening. And I think it's important to show that even, the king of Wakanda understands issues of immigration, similar to conservative arguments in this country. That's what we need. Showing people of different backgrounds and faiths, religions, races, showing them experiencing similar problems that we do. The problem is a lot of the woke stuff we actually end up getting is like they scream that white people are bad. They claim white people are the villains. And that's just going to perpetuate racism. I think in the end, what really helps us come together is just watching a TV show with characters of all different backgrounds. We have a lot of commercials where there's mixed race families. I think that's fine. I really don't care. I do think there's like what these commercials do is you'll have like a mixed race family and it's almost every single commercial. Well, you'll get these conspiracy theorists who think the real reason they're doing it is to push an agenda. And that's just not true. The real reason they do it is they're trying to get every single demographic to buy their product. So you'll see a black father and he's like pouring a bowl of Cheerios and then a white mother. They're not doing it because they're trying to push some agenda. They're doing it because they're like, we want literally everyone in this country to buy our product. And so they're trying to get that much representation on the TV. I think that's fine. I think it's whatever. Good. In the end, I think we need to recognize ourselves as Americans first. How amazing would that be? People arguing about how we're tax-paying Americans and we're sending foreign aid for gender studies in Pakistan. Hey, there's an argument. I want the pipes in Flint to be fixed, right? I mean that figuratively because they have been. When I think about what's going on in inner cities, when I think about what's going on in Evanston or Chicago, I want those things to be fixed. I think at this point, though, the solution is, as Americans, we're going to take care of our own. We're going to take care of the people who are paying into the system and who are deserving of, or I think a lot of people are deserving of help, don't get me wrong. But it's like if we're all part of this community as Americans and we're putting in resources, that means we should help the poor. That's my opinion. It means I think we should be taxing these billionaires who I don't much care for. Why should I care if Tom Steyer's got to pay more money? That guy was flooding hundreds of millions of dollars to ban guns. And then I look at these progressive leftists and they say things like the legit ones, not the fake corporatist ones. Now, they believe in socialism, but I don't agree with that. But they do believe in the right to bear arms. And I think, you know what? Every trans person, every marginalized person should be armed to the teeth. Carry around your KSG 25 tactical shotgun loaded up with double-aught buckshot. Do it. It's your right to keep and bear arms. And I don't like the idea of white supremacists hurting or taking away someone's rights either. I don't want them to gain power. But I think what's happening at the establishment level is going to exacerbate that. And it's almost like it's the plan. Now, I believe in a utopian vision of America, a great American melting pot of people of all different backgrounds who are sitting back, smoking cigars in their little rascal, overweight, grilling up food, holding their AR-15s and whatever. I'm kidding, by the way. But I love the libertarian joke where it's like, I just want my gay married trans women couple to be able to smoke pot and shoot guns on their property in peace. Something like that. You get the point? It's like those of us who are libertarian, and that's, I think, the good guys. We don't care what other people do. You know what I mean? For the most part, it's like, dude, if you got property and you are trans, you are a gay married couple, whatever, you want to smoke pot, you want to mind your own business, and you want to have a bunch of guns, I want you to do it. I want you to buy it in Bitcoin. I want you to be able to legally smoke pot, grow what you want, and be left alone. And that means we got to protect the rights of everybody. And that also means when you look at projects like this in Oakland and in Evanston, when they're centered around race, this is more of an authoritarian practice that will create ideological zealots that will result in more racism. I think people need to understand what "don't tread on me" means. It means, bro, you don't tread on me, I won't tread on you. You go do your thing, and I hope you're happy and have a good day. And I think the rights that I have are the rights that you deserve as well. I tweeted something about people, the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And then some leftists responded like, so are you basically saying you think the Black Panther Party should have a ton of guns? And I was like, yes, 100%. Yes. Each and every one of them. And they showed up in Virginia to defend the right to bear arms. And they were praised by conservatives and 2A advocates and libertarians. And then this guy responded, based. I'm like, yeah, dude, absolutely. The trans community should be armed. If you're concerned about these people being targeted by transphobes and bigots who want to hurt them, I think they have a right to exist and have all their rights defended. They should have guns. I'll leave it there. I don't want to. I'll rant on this later, maybe it's IRL podcast. But I'll leave it there. You get the point. I don't think reparations is going to solve the problem. I'm not opposed to helping the poor, but focusing on race is creating more problems than it's solving. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. over at youtube.com/timcast is my main channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all then.